Heading again to the very suspiciously insecure, but what do we know, we aren't real developers, Globomantics application, there is a page that has an input field called user ID. This fulfills the first requirement for allowing user input. Next, you need to take a look at the source code to see how this input is handled. You can immediately see that this is handled differently than the PHP shell exec input from the command injection. Instead, the user input is added to a MySQL query string that is ran with the MySQLi query PHP function. The result is then parsed and the first and last name is returned. The input from the query is not sanitized first, and the way it's added to the query string is insecure, allowing for manipulation. You can read more about the specific case at the link in the demo associated files, but the point here is that this is telling you that the input from the user is being added and supplied as a query string to the database, and it also lets you know that the database being used is MySQL. The more you know about the company's applications, the better you are, so at the very least, you know that the user IDs and the associated information is kept in this MySQL database, and that the application is using Apache and PHP on a Linux OS, a well-known stack called a LAMP stack. With the requirements for exploitation met, you can see that if you provided an ID-like input, the response will post in the window with the first and last name just as you suspected. Because the ID variable is accepted as part of the query without input validation, you can use a simple SQL injection attack like this that will translate to select all from users where the user ID equals 1, because 1 equals 1 is always true. The purposeful exclusion of the apostrophe is required so the string is formatted properly within the double quotes in the request variable. And once you execute this, congratulations, you get all the users out of the database. And knowing that this is likely an attack vector for the same group that you just found performing the command injection attacks, now is a good time to take a look at the firewall detection logs for SQL injection activity as well. No reason to head back into the command line just yet. You can simply pick up where you left off in Kibana. This time, use the tag of critical to filter the results for the error log. This gets rid of even more noise than simply removing the protocol warning. Find your spot where the command injection attack finished, and a short scroll down through time from there, like you knew it would be there, are warnings for SQL injection from the same client IP. SQL injection, much like command injection attacks, will normally escalate, starting out with basic information gathering like usernames, then slowly gathering more and more information required to access even more sensitive data. So you can walk through the progression the same way you could for the command injection. The use of union select is flagged by one of the patterns as a marker that someone is trying to get the database to bind other data with the data that's intended to be displayed. Getting an error response is common as the attacker attempts different types of queries that may or may not work. To get rid of even more noise, you can filter the query for the tag SQL injection specifically. And after scrolling back through, you can see the evolution of commands a little more clearly. Adding bytes to change the way the fields are interpreted as they are passed to the database, and adding additional comments and escape characters revealing the database names, name of columns, versions of the database, the scheme of the database, and slowly gathering the information required to finally execute this command here, which appears to concatenate the password field with the other returned fields. Now, just like before, you understand what their endgame was. And this was a likely endgame at that. But again, what's more useful is to know whether or not the adversary was successful. You need to know what they know. So now is a good understanding check moment. How would I figure out whether or not this query was successful? Well, this information is returned to the web application and served up to the client as part of the HTTP session that's associated with this rule that was triggered. So you can use this unique ID to find it in the mod security audit log. Leveraging the exact same command as your last search, but with a different ID, you can scroll through the associated output and find the results of the query here. And unfortunately, it printed out the MD5 hash of all the passwords for each of the users in the database. So now you know not only that you were attacked, but exactly what was compromised and can start to figure out where they might go from here with this information.